by empowerment, you people have drafted it and put into that is, I have to make the HRD minister. Explain to me, what's the concept? What's the root of the word? What is the origin? What do you expect out of it to come out? Full half a day we argued, convinced Bodia first. When he said, I understand now, I know how to answer him, we let him go. And then he went and convinced Narasimha Rao. Even today, I wish Narasimha Rao was there, he would have then told us what he understood. An eminent scholar that he was, fantastic analyst that he was, with the knowledge of 8 languages, putting it together, he would have done it much better, would have done it really well if, even today, if you ask that question. Because the question is still haunting us. From 1985, 86, it's still haunting us. What is empowerment? Have we reached empowerment? Has that education policy reached their empowerment? Will the present day HRD, I'm putting this question particularly to AIU because he said right now we do make some sort of notes for the policy making. I'm looking forward how those 2 paragraphs in that national education policy called towards equality there, and the program of action they came out giving tremendous amount of support to those 2 paragraphs, because of which today we have the women's studies centers. In 1986, it said every university and institution in this country will have a center for women's studies. Using that half of a phrase, we have argued and created a lot of women's studies centers in this country. But what Narasimha Rao started and helped us to create, today the HRD ministry is wanting to bury. Burial is better than cremation. Sorry, I'm not getting into religion. But what I mean is, from burial you can bring it up, particularly if it is not done well. But with cremation you can't do anything. Basam ho gaya, khatam, sab. No, so I'm using that word burial because we still have hopes. We still have hope that they have not done a good job of it, so that we can bring back the women's studies into. So I'm very happy that Shahida at least took it upon herself, that we collect the people together, have a rethink, have a look at where we are, take a stock taking, and then see whether, not authority-wise, but scholarship-wise, are we moving forward with the type of scholarship we are producing in the field of women's studies. Because for too long the women's studies in India, let me say this is the big defect of women's studies in India. For too long the women's studies of India depended on either on the women's movement outside the university system for its strength, or on the government frameworks and government institutions and policies, not even policies, government institutions for grants, support, moral and physical and financial. Women's studies in India still had not become an independent entity with its own sources of finance or its own methods of collecting the finance and doing. Not even today. All the important institutions started by the able women leaders today are depending on ICSSR for maintenance report, maintenance money. ICSSR has completely cut off, gives the minimum today. Director salary and 1 or 2 staff member salary. Rest they don't. Fellowships have been cut off. Workshops, no money. So you find that this is a very sorry state of affairs we have in women's studies. So it's really left to us to revive ourselves, which can be possible only when we get together every now and then. We used to have it. We used to have a flurry of activities in women's studies, among women scholars coming together and doing it. Now in 3 years' time, almost first or second occasion, I'm seeing that women are coming together. Even the Indian Association for Women's Studies, which means once in 2 years, is losing its sort of grip over the women scholars in this country. So that's why I began thinking about whether I always thought about it, whether it's a very familiar debate, particularly in women's studies with political science scholars, developmental activists, NGOs, not talking about feminism, radicalism and other theories, but practical, down-to-earth public policies, public administration and institutions and government policies. whether some of the approaches which we have been taking in women's studies and using indiscriminately or correct expressions, do they really indicate where we want to go? Do they really tell us what we want to reach? Do they really tell us our own goals and our thinking process? So when we kept this for a long time in the women's studies as a debate, whether what our public policies are performing or aiming at or using as goals for women, are they reaching the goals or target group? It has been one of the very lively ones we have had, so at times. It's also part of the United Nations approach, which talks in terms of states and governments and not really the people, though they say it's for the people. So this is where the expression empowerment of women are coming in plenty. In every other occasion, everywhere, from the Prime Minister to anybody we talk in terms of. It has become a blanket word. We don't know what else to do. Say women's empowerment. What do you work for? Women's empowerment. Now, what is empowerment? Whether we really have empowerment or not, whether we are really aiming at empowerment or not, that's the thing which we had. In fact, I began thinking about it. I've done this public policy in the UGC programs. Namely, from the time we had this conference, Decade Mexico, when we came out and had a survey of how the women are living in this country, what's the status of women in this country, we came out with a report called Towards Equality, done by the Government of India. The best and the worst, both are by the Government of India sponsored. The government sponsored this study, Status of Women in India. ICSSR got formed at that time. So this Towards Equality report clearly told us where we are, what we need to go. Even till today, that remains as our fundamental document on women's status in this country. We haven't moved too far from that place. At that time, there were divisions of opinion among the stalwarts who were forming this committee. Some talked in terms of political power, some talked in terms of economic power, some talked in terms of basic necessities like education, health, and other things. So the issue of development came up at that time. So we began the next 3, 4, 5-year plans talking in terms of what you call women's development. By women's development, what we found was in all the basic necessities of life, like education, health, food, poverty, income, whatever employment, whatever you think in terms of, we were far, far below, and the women's conditions were worse than the general average conditions of India or the conditions of men in this country. So the first and foremost target they had was the development of women. So our 5-year plans began talking in terms of women's literacy, women's health in all the various indicators, health indicators, employment, income, things like this. Till today, if you see the census, it's the same type of indicators which we have on which we are getting the figures, are not too far away. The figures haven't moved much, much farther at all. So this is where we are still with literacy, IMRs, MMRs, employment, wage, the sort of indicators which we had in 1950s. But we were very unhappy about it for 2 reasons. First, the figures have not moved out much at all, in spite of all that's happening. And so by the 4th 5-year plan, when we reached, then instead of believing in we believed in a trickle-down theory. So we thought that if India grows, then women will grow. If India falls, women will fall. If India falls, the first one to fall is women, later on followed by men. But this is the way the theory was given. So let's think in terms of the growth pattern of India. If the growth increases, the health indicators increase, literacy indicators increase, and others increase, women will automatically go up. That is what we call trickle-down theory. The trickle-down theory did not work for a long time, and everybody was very, very unhappy about it. Nothing trickled down. And if it drops of trickles came down, that went to men. Women never got a share in it. So the trickle-down theory was soon changed into, when we became 5th 5-year plan, into something like, instead of women's development, we began talking in terms of women in development. Many of you know about these things. And in women in development means, you began finding out why women are not able to get a share of the development which is being talked about in India. we found we are nowhere around the access part of it. We are not the recipient of it. We are not the beneficiaries of it, even though the governments believed we will get it. So finally we had all this quota approach. We try to reserve quotas in our economic employment, in our wage, in our education, along with backward castes, other backward castes in this country, or other backward classes in this country, other backward castes in this country. So all of them put together, we began having also a certain amount of reservation in the various policies. We reached fifth five-year plan. We hadn't reached anywhere. You put 33% reservation for women in IRDP. We are not even getting 5% in actual benefit. We had women-headed households will get the money, and money will not go to the men but to the women. Not even 1% in India was identified as women-headed households. IRDP said, in India we only have 1%, and the पानी साहब आपका ओडिशा गवर्नमेंट चीफ सेक्रेटरी ने कह दिया कि हमारे ओडिशा में विमेन हेडेड हाउस होल्ड है ही नहीं, हम पैसा कहाँ देंगे, तो आपका पैसा सारा गया मैन को. So that's the way it was treated. So that approach also didn't work us. Then we said, why is it women in development is not working? So women, we wanted to reach a participatory development. You are nowhere in a position we can make the decisions. You are nowhere in a position where you can influence the decision. You can nowhere in a position where you enforce the decision. You are nowhere around to monitor what's happening in this country. Because you do not have power. You do not have the necessary political power in order to be at the decision-making level. Political power doesn't mean parliament. Political power even in bureaucracy. Political power in the university system. Political power, any system, any particular institution where you are at the top in order to be part of the policy making, policy implementation, policy enforcement. Finally, most important, policy monitoring. Where is it going? Why is it not going? This sort of decisions. So at that time, then people began talking in terms of empowerment. From development, we moved on to empowering the women so that the women not merely are the subject of your policies, they are the target, at least up to 33% of your policies everywhere, are also supposed to be allocated resources to be dealt with on this, but still you are not able to do it. So that one, then we understood, is only a political power of women will do. In the 9th five-year plan, I don't know, Chidambaram was the finance minister, I don't know who are. They even allocated in our budget 33%. In the budget of every department, including of UGC, they allocated 33% of the resources should go to women, women beneficiaries and women, so that they will compulsory. When we asked them what did we get for women, they only showed the salary and said 33% gone. Activities, nothing. Or later on, after the Women's Studies Center came up, they will show the Women's Studies Center and said 33% gone. And in the government of India, very many departments like defense, foreign policy, information broadcasting, police, home, said that there are no women in our ministries, there's no women component in our ministry, so we don't have to give 33% to women. We said police has to protect the women. Most of our crime is taking place. Why is it you are saying police has nothing to do with women? Right? External Affairs Ministry, they will send a delegation to United Nations with 2 women and 15 men, and her affair will be counted as what they have allocated to women. Information broadcasting said we have nothing to do. Then we said indecent representation of act of women is under your ministry. What have you done for that? Advertisement is under your ministry. What have you done about women there? The way you project women in advertisement, have you done anything about that? So nobody did, not even the bureaucracy which is in charge of implementing. Supposed to be very enlightened, elitist population of this country did not worry about women. So then it dawned on Rajiv Gandhi when he became the Prime Minister of the country to go back and see what we can do. So he organized a special group and asked them to come out with what you call perspective plan for women. A good document came out of it. And one of the important recommendations which came out was reserving women seats in Panchayati Raj, the local governments. Unfortunately, Rajiv Gandhi could not implement it. Before that, he was thrown out. Unfortunately, it was defeated in Rajya Sabha by one male member. The amendment could not get through. And Lok Sabha passed it, but Rajya Sabha could not do it because of the one member. I'm very sorry to say he comes from South. He came from South and very enlightened part of India. And so it was left later on to Narasimha Rao to bring that act in 1992. So we had the Constitutional Amendment Act. What's the underlying thing behind it is a politically empowering measure. Because women are nowhere to be seen, they are nowhere near decision making, they do not have a political power, they are not able to monitor, negotiate, decide the policies at all at the top. So bring more women into political power, especially at the lowest level, that's where the women suffer a lot more than the urban one. So more than parliament, what we need is at the local government. So Rajiv Gandhi did bring it. A fantastic measure, acknowledged by no less than a person like Atal Bihari Vajpayee in one of the huge workshops we had in Delhi. The two things he said, I still remember that. He had newly become the Prime Minister of the country. He came to inaugurate 8th March. I must share this because we all have wrong views of people. He first came and addressed the gathering in English. Came as a surprise to all of us because BJP never believed in addressing meetings in English. And the second thing he said, when I was coming to this conference, one of my very, very able colleagues told me, you must go there and talk in Hindi to them. I came and saw lots of South Indians and others sitting here, not only the North Indians. I decided I will talk in English. He said that. I can guess who is the one who said it to him. Then, in the course of the thing, he also said one of the most important empowering measure in this country was made by that young man, a very able young man, Rajiv Gandhi, who made this amendment to the Constitution. I think that was almost the last time a Prime Minister has worried about the Panchayati Raj in this country. After that, Panchayati Raj also, the Constitution is there, amendment is there, 33% reservation there. In some parts of India, they have even increased it to 50% reservation because women will not oppose, they'll come and sit like cows in your Panchayat bodies. So 50% भी कर दो, 75% भी कर दो, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. 2-4 आदमी होंगे, गुंडे घुस जाएंगे, they will run the Panchayats, the women चुपचाप बैठी रहेंगी. I don't know what is happening. So this is where you begin questioning it. I'm taking that as an example because that's called as political empowerment. Has a 33% or even 50% of women who have come into our panchayats, into our local bodies, urban local bodies, municipality, has it changed the life of women either in the rural side or here? Yes, I'm one of those who specialize in Panchayat Raj because I was very enamored of it and I'm a political science person. So I took it up and all my studies after that was only on Panchayati Raj. I was not happy only with the act and the interpretations. I used to go to even villages. It just makes, as long as I had the strength in my body and others had the money to give me, I was going to village after village, sitting with women and talking to them. I learned Hindi. I knew a lot of Hindi, but I never used to talk publicly. It's only with the Panchayat women I practiced my Hindi and began addressing meetings in Hindi. Because I had no other choice except, in fact. So that was a thing which, and I was one of the most romanticized scholar on. So any small improvement in a woman's voice or in her thing, I used to just get thrilled and immediately document it and present it to the world. It's amazing when I went to New York to play Beijing Plus 5. We had an introductory meeting in one of the groups and everybody was introducing themselves, asking for what's your specialization. I said, Sushila Kaushik, India, my specialization is women in local government, panchayat. The woman who organized jumped up. Oh God, you are specialized on that? I said, yes. Can you give us a talk tomorrow on this? That much it was becoming an internationally famous field, what we had done. But today, after 20 years, I'll ask this question: have we reached what we have to reach? Have we succeeded? Have our official panchayats, constitutional panchayats, legal panchayats as they call it, able to overcome our caste panchayats? Especially in North India, have they been able to overcome the KAP panchayats? Haryana, UP, even sometimes in Tamil Nadu. The KAP panchayats, are they still as powerful as they were before? If Indians are equal citizens and even pull candidates and come up as panchayat chairperson, SCs are coming up panchayat chairpersons because it's reserved for them. Have we got rid of the problem of SCs under distance discrimination in the villages of India? I had a lot of bad experiences too on the way, but still, the SC women themselves used to come and say, "Madam, pehle to main zameen mein baithti thi. Ab to main cart mein baiti hu." You know, the whole Rahul Gandhi cart affair, I understand it from that point of view. Cart just doesn't represent merely a bed or sleeping. Cart is a simhasan for them. It's a throne. In the village, where do you sit? You sit on the cot. Others sit on the floor. So she used to say, I am a SC, but I sit on the cot. बाकी सारे तो जमीन में बैठते हैं. Brown भी जमीन में बैठते हैं क्योंकि मैं पंचायत chairperson हूँ. I thought that was a supreme point of empowerment for that woman. But then I said, चाय वाय पिलाती हो? सब चाय का पीते हैं. चाय वाय नहीं पिलाएंगे, हमारे हाथ से कोई चाय नहीं पिएगा. Because she was an SC. So when it comes to giving tea or anything, they will only serve the high caste, they will not serve the low caste. So you are still not watching everything we knew. Politically, she might have become empowered and powerful, but socially, she's still not able to cut that thing too much. She came and said, पहले तो मुझे कोई बुलाएंगे ही नहीं, अब तो मैं मेहमान हूँ, गाँव में कुछ भी हो, नंबर 1 मैं ही हूँ. पूजा में भी मुझे बुलाते हैं. मैं पहले जाती हूँ तभी बाकी लोग अंदर आते हैं. So she was supremely proud about her position and empowerment. I've narrated all this. I have sort of documented all these small experiences to prove. But I have to ask myself after a while, on the long term, because in the beginning I was also very, very happy about it because धीरे-धीरे से ठीक हो जाएगा गाँव. लेकिन I find now it has not become. There were even at that time some panchayat chairpersons being endangered, threatened. तुम्हारे बच्चे को किडनैप कर देंगे, तुम्हारे आदमी को मार देंगे. Immediately she gives up and goes. It was there. The threat was still there. But there were also women who said, I'll give up, but I'll not give up, do what you want. वो भी थे उस समय. All mixture was there. But we find this sort of empowerment, we have to keep asking the questions. I'll now finish this. Whatever we are working on, I'll give another example. In my own women's study center, a girl was employed. I knew her for long before that. She was employed as a typist. Her uncle, mama, she's a Malayali girl. The mamas are very powerful in Kerala families. The mama had known him before. And first month salary, I paid everybody in cash because they knew they wanted money, they want to see money. After 2-3 months, when we went on paying, I'll take it in my thing and then distribute it according to the university audit object. Ma'am, you can't do this. एक महीने में तो ठीक है, बाकी नहीं. Everybody should directly receive the money. We won't pay in cash. They have to pay only in check. Ask them to open a bank account. So I told all of them, open a bank account. यहीं पे तो SBI है, जब चाहिए पैसा निकालो. All the others did. But this girl won't open. I again called her and said, look, university is objecting to. Again, I have to plead with them. अगले महीने तक तुम्हें open करना पड़ेगा. She cried. She just went off. Then went and sat in a chair, began crying. So these boys came and said, पता नहीं ma'am, Lata is crying. So I called her up. What is the matter? She said, मैं जब भी घर में जाके कहती हूँ बैंक में अकाउंट खोलूँगी, मेरा मामा मारने के लिए आ जाता है, बेल्ट लेके आता है. I can't open the account. I said, मैंने कहा इधर आओ, phone लगाओ. So she called up her mama. I talked to him, gave him hell. ऐसे कल सुबह आपकी भतीजी की नौकरी से निकाल दूंगी. It can't go on. What is this nonsense? कल सुबह बैंक खोल के मुझे बैंक अकाउंट आना चाहिए. आधा घंटा टाइम देती हूँ, 11 बजे आएगी, लेकिन करके ही आएगी. अगर आप नहीं करते हो मैं निकाल दूंगी उसको नौकरी से. Next morning she opened the account and came. Now what does it show? She receives the money, takes it home, gives it to them, and they have the right to use the money, invest. No, मैं तो उसी की शादी के लिए कर रहा हूँ, मैं तो उसी के लिए डाल रहा हूँ, मैंने वो खुद ही शादी के लिए सेव कर लेगी, अकाउंट खोल के दे दो उसको. This is, do you call this empowerment? How many women then we found? How many women get their salary, go back and dump the salary to their husbands or even mother-in-law? They in turn give her, आपकी बस की फेयर इतनी है, आप इसे रख लो, बाकी पैसा हमारा है. अम्मी तो तुम्हें खाना पीना कर रहे हैं सब. Yesterday, a newspaper item carries Times of India. A doctor committed suicide in Delhi. 8 years of marriage. Doctor commits suicide in Delhi because the husband keeps asking for dowry. And the husband is a Indian Airlines A-class pilot. He is not lacking money. Pilots are paid very well. And she is not an illiterate poor woman. She is a doctor. For 8 years she has been a doctor. He is still asking for dowry and the in-laws are asking for dowry. She has committed suicide. The same thing happened about quite a few years back. Safdarjung Hospital, doctor and his wife. Wife committed suicide. Doctor is demanding dowry.